I was a skeptic, a trained biologist who'd spent 15 years in these woods cataloging every species, every sound, every track pattern. But on my last night in Bluff Creek, my camera captured something that made me abandon my research, my career, and everything I thought I knew about what's possible in the wilderness. The question that haunts me isn't whether Bigfoot exists, it's this. What did that creature understand about me in the moment our eyes locked, and why did it choose that night to finally let itself be seen? I remember the exact moment everything changed. It was October 15th, and the morning air in Bluff Creek felt different somehow. Colder than it should have been. I'd been working in these Northern California woods for 3 months straight, tracking black bears and documenting their feeding patterns before winter came. The forest was my office, and I knew every trail, every clearing, every odd-shaped rock for miles around. Or, at least I thought I did. That morning started like any other morning. I loaded my backpack with my camera equipment, my notebook, some trail mix, and plenty of water. My boots crunched through the dry leaves as I walked the same path I had walked dozens of times before. The sun was barely up, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange between the tall redwood trees. Birds were starting their morning songs. Everything felt normal. Everything felt safe. But then I saw the first track. It was pressed deep into the mud near the creek bank, right where I had set up one of my trail cameras 2 weeks before. I stopped walking and stared at it. The print was huge, much bigger than any bear track I had ever seen. And I had seen hundreds of bear tracks in my career. This one was different. It looked almost like a human footprint, but it was at least 16 inches long and 7 inches wide. My own boot was only 11 inches long. Whatever made this track was massive. I knelt down beside it and pulled out my measuring tape. My hands were shaking a little, though I told myself it was just from the cold morning air. The track was fresh, maybe from the night before. The edges were still sharp and clean. I could see the clear impression of 5 toes, each one leaving its own deep mark in the soft earth. No bear has toes like that. No bear walks on 2 feet and leaves prints that look like this human. I took photos from every angle. Wide shots, close-ups, shots with my measuring tape in the frame to show the scale. Then I stood up and looked around. The forest suddenly felt bigger, quieter, like it was watching me instead of the other way around. Following the tracks was easy at first. They led away from the creek and up a small hill, each step spaced about 4 feet apart. That meant whatever made them had incredibly long legs. The stride of a tall human might be 3 feet, maybe 3.5 at most. These were longer. I followed them for maybe 200 yards before they disappeared onto harder ground where the dirt was too packed to show prints. But the tracks were not the only strange thing I found that day. As I moved deeper into the forest, I started noticing broken branches. Lots of them. They were snapped off clean, 8 feet up in the air, sometimes even higher. I stopped beneath one and reached my arm up as high as I could. My fingertips barely brushed 6.5 feet. Whatever broke these branches was tall, very tall, and strong enough to snap thick green wood like it was nothing more than a dried twig. Some of the branches were twisted into weird shapes, too, bent and woven together in ways that did not look natural at all. I had seen bears mark their territory by scratching trees or rubbing against them. I had seen deer rub velvet off their antlers on saplings. But I had never seen anything like this. It looked almost deliberate, almost like someone was leaving a sign that said, "I was here." My stomach felt tight and nervous as I pulled out my notebook and started drawing what I saw. I wrote down every detail: the height of the breaks, the thickness of the branches, the way some of them pointed in the same direction, almost like arrows. I was a scientist. I dealt in facts and evidence and things I could measure and prove, but nothing in my training prepared me for this. Over the next 2 weeks, I found more tracks, more broken branches, more strange signs that something big and unknown was moving through my research area. I checked my trail cameras every few days, downloading the footage onto my laptop back at my small cabin each night. Most of it showed exactly what I expected: bears wandering past, deer grazing, raccoons sniffing around in the dark. But then I saw the shadows. They appeared on 3 different cameras over the span of 5 days. Just quick flashes of movement at the very edge of the frame. Something tall and dark passing by just out of clear view. The cameras were motion activated, so they should have captured whatever triggered them. But these shadows moved too fast. Or maybe they knew exactly where the cameras were pointed and stayed just outside the shot on purpose. That thought made my skin prickle with goosebumps. I started leaving the cameras running for longer periods. I added 2 more cameras in spots where I had found the strange tracks. I set up an audio recorder near the area with all the twisted branches. Every night I went back to my cabin and reviewed everything I had collected. Most nights there was nothing unusual, but some nights there were sounds. Deep sounds. Low whooping calls that echoed through the trees. Sharp knocking sounds like someone hitting 2 thick pieces of wood together. Grunts and groans that were too deep and too powerful to come from any animal I knew. I played them over and over, comparing them to every wildlife sound database I could find online. Nothing matched. Nothing even came close. My hands shook as I saved each audio file with careful labels. Date, time, location, duration. I was building a case, collecting evidence, doing everything a good scientist should do. But deep down, something was changing inside me. That solid wall of skepticism I had built over 15 years of fieldwork was starting to crack. I stopped sleeping well after the 3rd week. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those shadows moving just outside the camera frame. Every creak and snap outside my cabin made me sit up in bed, heart pounding, wondering what was out there in the darkness. I knew I should leave. Pack up my gear, file my bear research report, and get back to the university where everything made sense. But I could not do it. Something kept pulling me back into those woods every single morning. I bought more equipment, way more than my research budget allowed, but I did not care anymore. I drove 2 hours to the nearest town and spent almost $1,000 on 4 additional trail cameras, 3 more audio recorders, and a thermal imaging device that cost as much as my truck payment. My credit card made a sad beeping sound when I swiped it, but the clerk smiled and handed me my receipt. She had no idea what I was really buying this stuff for. Nobody did. Setting up the new cameras took me 2 full days. I placed them in a wide circle around the area where I had found the most tracks and broken branches. Each camera faced a slightly different direction, and I set them to trigger even from the smallest movement. If anything bigger than a rabbit walked through that zone, at least one camera would catch it. At least that was what I told myself. The audio recorders went into trees, hidden inside weatherproof boxes I painted dark green and brown to blend in with the bark. I climbed up 8 feet on each tree and strapped them tight, pointing the microphones down toward the forest floor. If something walked underneath, I would hear it. If something made those weird whooping calls again, I would have crystal clear recordings from multiple angles. But here's the thing that started to bother me. The thing that made my stomach twist into knots every time I thought about it. The creature, whatever it was, seemed to know what I was doing. It was like playing chess with an opponent I could not see. Every time I set up a camera in a new spot, the activity would shift to a different area just outside the range. Every time I moved the cameras to follow the tracks would show up somewhere else the next day. I started testing this on purpose. One morning, I set up a camera pointing east toward a thick grove of pine trees. That night, my other cameras caught shadows moving west, in the completely opposite direction. The next morning, I moved 2 cameras to the west. That night, the thermal sensor picked up a large heat signature to the north, but it moved away before I could get a clear reading. It was always 1 step ahead of me, always just out of reach. The audio recordings got stranger too. I would sit in my cabin at night with my headphones on, listening to hours and hours of forest sounds. Most of it was normal. Wind in the trees, owls hunting. mice scurrying through dead leaves, but then, around 2 or 3 in the morning, the weird sounds would start. Those deep, whooping calls, each one lasting about 5 seconds, going up and down in pitch like some kind of language I could not understand. The wood knocking sounds came in patterns too. 3 knocks, then silence. 2 knocks, then silence. 5 knocks, then nothing for 20 minutes. I played these sounds for my colleague Dr. Sarah Chen over the phone one night. She was a wildlife expert too, someone I had worked with for years on other projects. I trusted her opinion more than almost anyone. I held my phone up to my laptop speaker and played her a full minute of the clearest whooping sounds I had recorded. There was a long silence when the clip finished. "Where did you get this?" she finally asked. Her voice sounded tight and uncomfortable. "My research site, Bluff Creek. I have dozens of recordings like this." Another pause. "Those are not bear sounds. They are not mountain lions or elk or any large mammal I know. Are you messing with me? Is this some kind of joke?" "No joke. I've been recording these sounds for weeks now." I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line. "Send me the files, all of them. I want to run them through the analysis software at the lab." I sent her everything that night. 23 audio files, each one carefully labeled and time-stamped. She promised to get back to me in a few days. But when she finally called me back, her voice was different. Cold, distant. "I showed these to the department head," she said. "He thinks you are wasting time chasing ghost stories. He said if you do not finish your bear research and come back soon, there might not be a position waiting for you." My chest felt tight. What about the sounds? What did the software show? Nothing. The software could not match them to anything in the database. But that does not mean it is what you think it is. It just means we need more data, or it means the recordings are corrupted somehow. "They are not corrupted, Sarah. I checked them 100 times. "Then maybe you need to take a break. You sound exhausted. When was the last time you had a full night of sleep?" I could not answer that question. I could not remember. After we hung up, I sat in the dark cabin for a long time. The university thought I was crazy. My colleague thought I was losing it. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was spending too much time alone in the woods, seeing patterns that were not really there, hearing sounds that had simple explanations I was just too tired to figure out. But then my laptop pinged with a new notification. One of my cameras had just triggered. I clicked on the file and waited for it to load. The video was dark, shot in night vision mode, everything showing up in shades of gray and green. For the first 10 seconds, nothing moved, just trees and shadows in the usual nighttime forest. Then something stepped into frame. I watched that video clip 47 times before I finally made the decision. Each time I saw the same thing, a massive shape moving between the trees, walking upright on 2 legs, easily 7 or 8 feet tall. The night vision made everything look ghostly and green, but I could see enough. The way it moved was not like a bear. Bears lumber and sway. This thing walked with purpose, with long, smooth strides that covered ground fast. And right at the end of the clip, just for maybe 2 seconds, it turned its head toward the camera. Even though the face was hidden in shadow, I felt like it was looking right at me through the lens, right into my soul. I could not show this to Sarah. I could not show it to anyone at the university. They had already made up their minds about me. But I could not just sit in my cabin anymore either, staring at a laptop screen while whatever this was walking around out there in the darkness. I needed to see it with my own eyes. I needed to know for sure. On November 8th, I packed my backpack with everything I might need for a night in the woods: extra batteries for my flashlight, my handheld camera, water, and energy bars. A heavy coat because the temperature was supposed to drop below freezing, my emergency whistle and bear spray, even though I was not sure either would help me against what I might find. My hands were steady as I checked each item, but my heart was beating so hard I could feel it in my throat. The sun was already setting when I reached the area where my cameras had caught the most activity. The sky turned from orange to pink to deep purple as I walked. Birds stopped singing. The forest got quiet in that heavy way it does right before night takes over completely. I found a spot behind a fallen log about 30 yards from my main camera setup. I could see the clearing from there, but I was hidden pretty well in the shadows and brush. I turned off my flashlight and waited. Waiting in the dark forest is different than waiting anywhere else. Every sound gets louder. Every snap of a twig sounds like a gunshot. Every rustle of leaves sounds like footsteps. My eyes adjusted slowly, and I could start to make out shapes. Trees. Rocks. The camera mounted on the oak tree across the clearing, its little red light blinking every few seconds. I pulled my coat tighter and tried to breathe quietly. An hour passed, then 2. My legs cramped from sitting still for so long. My fingers went numb inside my gloves. I started to think maybe this was a stupid idea. Maybe I should just go back to the cabin and review the camera footage in the morning like always. Maybe actually being out here in the dark was not brave. It was just dumb. Then I heard the wood knocks. 3 of them, sharp and loud, coming from somewhere west of my position. The sound echoed between the trees. And I felt it in my chest like someone knocking on a door. I held my breath and listened. Silence for maybe 30 seconds. Then 2 more knocks, closer this time. Whatever was making that sound was moving. Moving toward me. My hand found the camera in my backpack. I pulled it out slowly, trying not to make any noise. I turned it on, and the little screen lit up bright in the darkness. Too bright. I quickly turned the brightness down to almost nothing and pointed the lens toward the direction of the sounds. My finger hovered over the record button. That is when I smelled it. A thick, heavy smell like wet dog mixed with rotting leaves and something else I could not name. Something wild and sharp that made my nose wrinkle. The smell got stronger and stronger until it felt like it was all around me, pressing in from every direction. I wanted to cough, but I bit down on my lip and stayed quiet. Then I saw the shape. It came out of the trees on the far side of the clearing, moving slow and careful. Even in the darkness I could tell it was huge, so much bigger than the video had made it look. It had to be at least 8 feet tall, maybe taller. Its body was covered in dark hair that seemed to absorb what little moonlight filtered through the trees. The shoulders were incredibly wide, wider than any human shoulders, wider even than a bear. Its arms hung down long, almost to its knees. I pressed the record button. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely keep the camera steady. The creature moved into the middle of the clearing and stopped. It stood there perfectly still, and I realized it was listening. Listening for something. Listening for me. Every part of my brain was screaming at me to run, to get up and sprint back down the trail to my truck and drive away from this place forever. But my body would not move. I was frozen behind that log, camera recording, watching something that should not exist standing 20 yards away from me. The creature turned its head slowly, scanning the forest. Even though I could not see its eyes clearly in the dark, I knew it was looking for the cameras. It knew they were there. It had always known. And now it was deciding something. I could feel the weight of that decision hanging in the cold night air. Then its head stopped turning. It was facing my direction, facing the log where I hid, facing me. For 3 heartbeats we stayed like that. I crouched and trembled with my camera. It stands tall and still in the clearing. The distance between us felt like miles and inches at the same time. Then it took a step toward me. My fingers slipped off the record button. The camera fell from my hands into the leaves. The creature took another step, then another. Each footfall was soft, despite its massive size, like it knew exactly how to move through the forest without making noise. My camera lay in the leaves beside me, still recording the tiny red light blinking up at the dark sky. I could not move to pick it up. I could not move at all. My whole body felt like it had turned to stone. It stopped about 10 feet away from the log where I hid, close enough that I could hear its breathing, deep and steady and calm, while my own breath came in short, frightened gasps that I tried to hold back. The moonlight caught its face for just a moment, and I saw eyes that reflected the light like a cat's eyes do. But these were not cat eyes. They were looking at me with something I can only describe as understanding, like it knew I was there, like it had always known. We stayed like that for what felt like hours, but was probably only a minute or two. Then, slowly, carefully, the creature turned and walked back across the clearing. It moved with that same smooth stride, and just before it disappeared back into the trees, it stopped and looked back one more time, right at me, right at the camera still recording in the leaves. Then it was gone, swallowed up by the darkness and the forest. I do not remember picking up the camera. I do not remember walking back down the trail to my truck. I do not remember the drive back to my cabin. The next thing I knew, I was sitting at my small kitchen table with the sun coming up outside my window. The camera sat in front of me. I had not looked at the footage yet. Part of me did not want to. Part of me wanted to throw the camera in the creek and pretend none of this ever happened. But I looked. Of course I looked. The video was shaky and dark, but it was there. All of it. The creature walked into the clearing, standing still and listening, turning toward me, taking those steps closer. And then that moment when the moonlight hit its face and those eyes looked right into the camera, right into me. I played it back 5 times, and each time I felt the same thing I felt in that moment behind the log. Not just fear, something deeper than fear. A feeling that my entire understanding of the world had just cracked wide open. I called the university that morning and told them I would not be finishing my bear research. I told them I was done. The department head sounded angry, but also relieved, like he had been waiting for an excuse to cut me loose anyway. Sarah sent me a text message later that day asking if I was okay. I did not answer. How could I explain what had happened? How could I tell her that everything we thought we knew about the forests of North America was wrong? I spent 3 days trying to decide what to do with the footage. I could post it online and let the whole world see it. But I had watched enough videos on the internet to know what would happen. People would call it fake. They would say I used special effects or put someone in a costume. They would tear apart every frame looking for proof that I was lying. And maybe some people would believe it was real, but those people already believed. The footage would not change any minds. It would just make me a target. I could bring it to scientists, real researchers with credentials and labs and funding, but I had already seen how they reacted to my audio recordings. They would find reasons to doubt. They would say the lighting was too poor, or the video was too short, or I was too far away to get a clear shot. Science works by testing and proving and repeating experiments. But how do you run an experiment on something that does not want to be studied? How do you test something that is smarter than your tests? The local Native American tribe had stories about creatures in these woods going back hundreds of years. They called them different names in different languages. But the descriptions were always similar. Tall beings covered in hair who walked like men but were not men. Forest guardians who knew the land better than any human ever could. I had heard these stories before I came to Bluff Creek, but I had dismissed them the way scientists dismiss most folklore. Old tales told around campfires to scare children and entertain tourists. Now, I understand those stories were not entertainment. They were warnings. Or maybe they were history. Truth passed down through generations because the people who came before us knew something we had forgotten. They knew these creatures were real, and they knew the forest belonged to them long before it belonged to us. I thought about government agencies and what might happen if they took my research seriously. Would they send teams into Bluff Creek with helicopters and rifles and tranquilizer darts? Would they try to capture one? Study it? Lock it away in some facility where nobody could see it? The thought made me feel sick. Whatever these creatures were, they had survived this long by staying hidden, by being smarter than us, by knowing when to show themselves and when to disappear. Did I really want to be the person who took that away from them? On the fourth day after my encounter, I packed up all my equipment, every camera, every audio recorder, every piece of gear I had scattered through those woods. I drove back to the university and resigned officially. They did not ask many questions. I think they were just happy I was leaving quietly. I kept the footage. I keep it still, stored on a hard drive in my closet. Sometimes late at night I watch it again, and I see those eyes looking back at me. Every time I watch it, I ask myself the same question. Why did it let me see it that night? After weeks of avoiding my cameras, after staying just out of sight, after being so careful to never show itself fully, why did it finally step into that clearing? Why did it walk toward me instead of away? I think it was sending me a message. Not with words, but with that moment. That long look we shared in the darkness. The message was simple. It knew I was there. It had always known. And it was letting me know that some mysteries are meant to stay mysteries. Some truths are not meant to be proven. The forest keeps its secrets, and maybe that is exactly how it should be.